You're listening to Crossroads Community Matters, and it's a pleasure to have you join us this morning. Also a pleasure to welcome into the studio Tracy White from SALT Southwest. Tracy, thanks for coming in. What does SALT Southwest stand for? Because it's not about condiments on the table, is it, to be fair?
No. So the SALT stands for Sexual Abuse Listening Therapy. And it lets people know that we work with any adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse.
Okay.
So any adult over the age of 18 who's been abused before the age of 16.
Right, okay. So that's the mechanics and the bare bones of that. And you're open to anybody in Plymouth or surrounding area? Where do people come from?
Anyone who can get to our offices. We're on Union Street. The charity's been in this city. It is for the city of Plymouth. And we've been here for 37 years. We've been in the building that we're currently in for about 22, I think. But we do have people travelling from further out, not very often, but there's a lady in Spain who someone kind of counsels on or listens to. We're all classed as listeners.
Yeah.
And there was a lady in France who came over for some sessions. It's just kind of what we do and how we do it is very difficult to find anywhere else.
So, established for, did you say over 20 years then?
We've been in the current building for about 22 years, but we've been in the city for 37.
37, okay, that's going somewhere back. So that's in the late 80s then.
Yeah.
And is there... I mean, there are so many organisations in the city that are helping people with many different issues. Sexual abuse, as it's one of those topics that tends not to get talked about a lot in some circles. And I guess adult survivors, implicit in that description of your job then is that adults grow up and don't have sexual abuse in childhood even looked at and then have issues later in life. Is that the kind of stuff that you're looking at?
Absolutely. The majority of children who are experiencing the abuse at the time don't tell anyone. It takes many years, takes even longer for male survivors. So the services that are needed for adult survivors of something that's happened is just, we can't do without it, really. So we've got the statistics are slightly different for the Southwest than they are nationally. Apparently, we have a higher ratio of survivors in the Southwest than the rest of the country does. Not quite sure why that is. Okay. But for the size of this city, so 1 in 4 women and 1 in 4 men have been abused 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men have been abused in childhood. So the average of 1 in 5, we've got, I think, around 260,000 people in this city, maybe a few more now. So 1 in 5 of those is somewhere around 50,000. I'm no good at maths. I got someone else to do that earlier.
I think that's pretty much spot on.
If we know those statistics are underreported vastly, even by adults in their adult lives. So the majority of people would say you could double that figure.
Now, when you think that's a huge number, when you break it down to how many tens of thousands of people would that be in a city the size of Plymouth? And that's well-researched, documented, national, over decades statistics. That's quite a difficult picture to look at, isn't it? That's something that really says lots of people are going to have lots of issues.
Yes.
And you're an organisation with a few people. I know there's other services that wrap around that, and people deal with things in different ways, but that must be quite a caseload for you and for your volunteers and for your team in terms of a constant stream of difficult subjects you're listening to. And maybe we'll touch on that a little bit later, because I know we talked off air about how you make sure that your folks don't go home carrying everything all the time, and how you're caring for yourselves. But that sheer volume of difficult conversations with people, how for you personally, because you're involved in the listening therapy, aren't you?
Yeah.
How do you offset in the balance of your life that you're hearing all of that? What is it that keeps you getting up every morning to keep working with people in that area?
Well, That's a really personal answer, which I'm really happy to give. So I came into SALT, previously called Safeline. That's how it was known in the city. Been SALT Southwest for many, many years now. But so I came in as a service user, and I was mentally very ill, very unwell, very unstable, married with a small child, alcoholic, lots of other things going on. And I attended a group that they were running then at another place in the city centre. It didn't work out for me attending the group. I think other people in the group already thought I was a member of the team. So I was invited onto the team and taken under people's wings on the team. And slowly but surely, actually, when I became a Christian, SALT's a Christian-based organisation. When I became a Christian, I ended up in a psychiatric hospital. So for me, meeting Jesus was a critical time in my life. I appeared to get worse rather than better.
Yeah.
But actually, the breakdown was the one thing that the Lord was able to do in order to rebuild. There wasn't anything in my life that was worth, patching up and cementing in. It needed to come down and start with some new foundations. So every morning I know that if the freedom that God has brought me, complete freedom, I'm not a dry alcoholic. Alcohol doesn't bother me. It has no power at all, because what was hooking me in is gone. It's dealt with, it's in the past. So I know every single day, and because I see every single day, that God wants to bring the same healing to every single person, whether they know him or not, whether they would reject him or not. He just gives and gives and gives without impartiality. And it's just amazingly humbling to watch.
We're going to take a break for some music, because we're a music radio station. That's a good place to pause it. Thanks for sharing that. We'll pick up on that when we come back. You're listening to Cross Rhythms, 96.3 FM. This is Community Matters. We're back with Tracy White talking about the work of SALT Southwest right after this. Tracy, before we broke for music, you shared very vulnerably, and thank you very much for doing that, something of your own story. And I know probably that's a deeper story and a wider story, but the hope that you've experienced that motivates why you do what you do. How many more people like you, not with the same story, but how many people are involved with SALT? How many people are actually involved in SALT Southwest are actually working alongside you?
Okay, so we have 8 volunteers altogether. So Carol, the current team lead, is paid for a small number of hours but does extra voluntary hours. Same for me, I'm the assistant team lead and training development person, whatever that title is. Our administrator is paid for a small number of hours but does some extra. And Gary, who now heads up our men's work, which we reopened recently, is also paid for a small number of hours, but we all do voluntary hours. So in all, there's 8 of us, plus our administrator. We have an amazing team of 6 trustees who are all really busy in their own lives, but they put into SALT some incredible things, and we're so thankful to them. We have over 50 prayer partners, because we class all these people as the whole team. It's not solely the people in the building doing the listening. So our listeners come from a variety of backgrounds, but whether they're counsellors or Carol and I are both trained mental health nurses. We don't work in that arena now. We gave it up to do more at SALT. Regardless of our professional backgrounds, we're all classed as listeners at SALT. And everyone's trained, everyone's looked after. You don't need qualifications and a piece of paper. You need the right heart, and you need to hear God saying, go volunteer at SALT.
Now, you're clearly coming from a Christian basis at SALT, because you mentioned the work of God in what you're doing and the impact of God's healing. And you said as well, whether people are going to reject him or not, he still wants to heal them, which I think is beautiful, because that's the Jesus that I'm fortunate enough to have encountered. People who are working with you, would they need to have a Christian faith if they're going to be volunteers and working alongside you? Is it that's quite a key for you?
As listeners, yes. The core team all have to be Christians. It doesn't matter what denomination, but Bible-based Christians who are walking and talking with Jesus on a daily basis. And we believe that we know that that's the only way we can do this work, because the insight the Holy Spirit gives us while we're in the room with people and with each other, you can't get anywhere else. It just doesn't happen. So it's the core of what we do. We worship together, we pray together. We have students sometimes on the team who come on placement. Those people are free to have the same faith, a different faith, or no faith. All of our service users can be of the same faith, a different faith, or no faith.
Now, just to interject there, and forgive me, because working in various voluntary community things, we fall into the language. Service user just means someone who might need your help.
Yeah, a survivor. Yeah.
And okay, and that's open, because I know you've said this to me off air, but I just want to re-emphasize this. So your basis is Christian. Your core team would be needing to share the Christian faith because of the ethos and the values of which you're working.
Yeah.
But you are open for anybody, even someone who said, I do not want God, but you can help me. It doesn't matter. Faith,
it
no
doesn't
faith.
matter. Doesn't matter.
So you've unpacked something with me off air, which I thought was quite fascinating, and it speaks to the impact that all of these negative stories and difficult stories can have, because you're talking about people's deep trauma. You've given the stats that 1 in 5 people have had childhood sexual abuse. I'd almost say probably that like 99.9% of us have got some trauma somewhere in our lives. And of that, probably 85% of us haven't had that dealt with, have we? So how do your volunteers, how do your listeners, how does your team cope with the fact they've got their own issues when they come into that environment?
One of the things that we do for survivors who come in, after they've had their assessment, is they go into 4 psychoeducational skills sessions. So, and it is kind of what it says on the tin, really, psychoeducational. So it's set up like a classroom. And that's so that no one shares too much in terms of trauma. It's all education. It's all about dissociation and shame and the consequences of that type of trauma, really. So we're equipping the adult that's in the room to allow the younger them to come into the here and now, little by little, so that they can finish processing the trauma.
Okay. Now, just for listeners, because I'm tracking with you on this quite closely because we talked off air. When you say you're equipping the adult in the room, you mean the person that's with you as an adult, inside they've got that younger person who is the person that has...
stuck in the trauma.
Yeah. And we can... And do you help them to get in touch with that then?
Yes.
Yeah.
In very safe, careful ways, little by little. That's what the psychoeducational skills sessions are for. And it works really, really well. We use lots of different tools. And it is a different experience for everyone who comes in the room. But 99.9% of the people in those first 4 sessions, the adults say, I was terrified of doing this, but I can do it. This is empowering me. Because there's no going back. Abuse is done in the sense that we're talking about. Children are powerless to stop what's going on. So we don't want that adult going to a powerless place and ending up powerless with that internal place. We want to bring that powerless place to an empowered adult who knows what to do and is ready to do it and has support to do it. And we've had people who have... So to answer your question, I could... Stop me when I go off on a tangent, because I will.
This is good stuff. This is good.
So all of our listeners do that training. They sit in the room for themselves and go through that. And that begins their journey. And there's lots of support. We work in pairs. So there's always... New listeners are always paired with an experienced listener. And the new listener is not expected to say or do anything for the first year other than sit in the room, monitor themselves, what they're thinking and feeling, what might be being triggered, bring that to supervision or to the senior listener they're working with, and then they can begin to input as it falls into place. It's an amazing framework. But so there's that level of supervision, there's team supervision, there's group supervision, and the 3 internal supervisors get external supervision. That's
a lot of supervision and very necessary as well. Look, we'll pick up with that in just a moment. We're back with Tracy White right after this. Tracy, you were talking before that last track about the way that your team really are cared for in the environment they're coming into. They're cared for before they start working with you. They're cared for all the time while you are working. Reminds me of a friend who's a psychotherapist who went through a year or more of group psychotherapy and one-to-one psychotherapy themselves as part of their 4-year training to be a psychotherapist. So absolutely crucial. The reason I wanted to bring that out is because I know that you are looking for people to volunteer as listeners, aren't you?
We are, yes. So there's just some development and growth going on in Salt. In January we were gifted the building that we're in, which is amazing, and for us that's God saying he wants to carry on doing this for future generations. Sadly, with the increase in online abuse and the dark web and the sexual trafficking, the numbers are going to go up, not down. And for us, God's heart is to have this for this city for however many generations to come. But of course we need to build, we need to grow with it. And it's a challenging area. No one really wants to, or very few people want to talk about sexual abuse, especially the sexual abuse of children. We tolerate talking about domestic abuse in adult lives easier than we tolerate talking about children being sexually abused.
Why do you think that is?
I think for lots of people they might struggle to talk about it because they've got it in their own history and they've never dealt with it. And there's the shame and the stigma that comes with that, some of those consequences. I think there's also the very uncomfortable comment that I'm going to make that perpetrators don't like it being talked about. So there's lots of diversionary tactics that go on that people might not even be aware of. And that's not to scare anyone, but it's a fact. So I think it's just so uncomfortable and people might feel a bit disempowered as to what do I do? It's easier to think in some ways, I can't listen to that because I don't know what to do about it. There's lots that people can do about it these days in terms of talking about it. Just start a conversation in the pub or somewhere, wherever you go. Not somewhere where you're hoping to have great fun, because I'm very careful when I meet people and people say, what do you do, Tracy? I choose whether to say, oh, well, I'm a mental health nurse by trade, or I work in therapy with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse. I'm very careful which one I say. And
when you say talk about it in the pub, you mean the general topic, not bring your own issues right out there in the middle.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just have the conversation, similar to, I mean, death is another taboo subject. Let's take it somewhere else. Death is like, don't say death, it's like passed away, gone to heaven, da-da-da-da. Well, I know he died. Robert Maltby at St Luke's Hospice is big on this. Have conversations with Rob, and he said, look, we just need to talk about the D word and have it in our daily conversation, because the more we avoid it, the less we're able to deal with it as a community, as families. So similar for the topic of sexual abuse by the sound of it.
And there is, again, that very uncomfortable point, Ian, where the less it's talked about, the more it can happen. Because it's not being exposed. And there's many places where it just needs to, including in our churches, needs to be talked about from the front, so that any perpetrators that are around who need their own support, not those people need their own support, but people need to be hearing, you're not going to get away with this easily in my church. Because we'll expose it, we're talking about it, we're looking, we're aware. Are
churches talking about it enough?
Nowhere near. I think I said to you before when we were talking that church leaders sometimes say to me, Tracy, how do we deal with this? How do we get it out there? And my answer is always talk about it from the front. And at that point their faces drop a little and kind of walk off. I get it's uncomfortable. I'll talk about it from the front. Invite me. Come on. I'm very happy.
Would you advise? I mean, because it's a difficult. It's an area if we haven't talked about it, and let's be honest, we haven't. It's an area that's going to be difficult to start to broach. And there are skills in communication of anything that we're trying to do for the first time that sometimes we need a facilitator to say, look, this can help you. Is that something that you can help with?
Absolutely. And I expect there's other members of our team that would be happy to do the same. And we're not headhunters. We're not It's not a soapbox thing. It's a realistic. If any pastor or leader in this city looks at how many people they've got sat in their building and do the 1 in 5 test, you're going to have them. Yeah. Church is meant to be the place for damaged, lost, feeling afraid people to be able to go for help and support and safety.
And the place often where that all comes out, you shared your story of what happened with you when you came to Christ. Things got worse for a while. Same. And Chris Cole, Founder Cross Rhythms, often says, don't sell Jesus on an easy, come to Jesus, everything's going to be great. So it might not be for a while. The good news is good news, but we may have to go through some of our bad news on the process of appropriating that good news. Where did I go? Because I took us off on a rabbit trail, and this is all about you and what you're doing. There's so much we could talk about on this topic, and it's such a wide one, and you're opening up in wider society. You focused in a little bit on the church. I mean, those numbers, if you're in a church of 200, 1 in 5 is a significant number of people, isn't it?
It is. You'll have to tell me how many, Ian, because my maths... Ask me about words
about
and I'm
40.
on it.
You're looking at about 40 in a church
40.
of 200. Yeah.
And that's the minimum, because that's underreported, 1 in 5 as an average in this city. And
those people are going to be getting on with their lives, holding on a job, family, mortgage, living life. Yeah. Because often our actual issues inside are just there, but they're going to be affecting us in daily life in some way, surely.
They absolutely are. Some survivors are aware of that, some are not. But there'll be some behaviour that we've got. Mine was alcohol, some drugs earlier on, but specifically alcohol. For other people, it's busyness, gambling, drugs, sex. All manner of things can be coping mechanisms to keep us away from ourselves.
Let's pick up on that in a minute. We're just going to come up to another track now, and we'll pick up a little bit on that. Also, I want to open up the needs that you have and how people can connect and support with what's going on with SALT. So
great.
We'll come back and talk some more with Tracy White right after this. Don't forget, if you miss any of the content on the programme, you can check it on the Listen Again at crossrhythms.co.uk/Plymouth and go to our Listen Again page, and we can also point you in the right direction. If you email into the studio, we can put you in touch with various people that you hear on the radio. Anyway, more of that later. We're back with Tracy right after this. Tracy, we were talking about, we zoomed in on churches. Obviously, we need to reiterate, I think, to help you, that your service is not just for people in churches, not just for people with a Christian faith. It's for any adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse that wants to access some kind of help. You're there for them. So let's just get that up and out
Definitely.
there. But on that note, then, you've mentioned that people have all kinds of coping mechanisms as we become adults with those kind of childhood traumas. If we're kind of cracking on with life and we're getting on anyway, do you think leading question, sorry, but let's do it anyway. Do you think we need to deal with those kind of things, or can we just crack on with life?
I guess some people do crack on with life, but I think if people are honest, they can generally say that something is affecting them. I've not yet met anyone who, when they start to talk about it, will say, I've always known in my relationship with my partner, or with parenting, or with social lives, or with anger and aggression and being a bit out of control with that, or my mental well-being, or the things that I think in my head, or sometimes my emotions are a bit not there when everybody else's are. There's always something, but it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you're happy with how your life is and it's not troubling you in any way at all, then there's no need to go there. But if you want more of a quality of life, and for some people, if there are other things that are going on for them in their mental health, and sometimes physical health. We work with lots of people who have got some really quite serious physical health issues, but no medical proof that they've got it. That numerous consultants, scans, tests, blood tests, and not everything's coming back clear, and everyone's puzzled. And that's a little red flag for us. So because we store trauma in our physical bodies, And that can translate into physical health issues. And there are some more common ones and some less common ones. And we see those clear up and stop completely, as well as some things that are diagnosed as mental illness are actually a result of trauma, and they clear up completely. That's exactly the case for me.
No, that's good, because that's bringing us to the hopeful part of this whole conversation. It's a fascinating topic. I sometimes wish that this was like one of those 1.5 hour podcasts that you get on YouTube, and we could be talking for ages, because honestly, I know you could talk for ages on it, and I know we could riff on this quite a lot, but the hopeful aspect of that is simply your living testimony and proof that there's a route through this to a much better, much more purposeful, much more hopeful place. And it was actually trauma manifested in your life quite dramatically, to the point of mental issues, breakdown. And folks listening to the radio heard my testimony know I've been there for various reasons. And let's keep that conversation out and alive and in the light, because it helps people to go with it.
Yeah.
But the fact of hope, you're saying you can, there's hope, there's light at the end of the tunnel, there's actual potential. And it sounds like it's just through people being trained to listen, because you're not doing a lot to people or at people, are you?
No, we're not. And if I just say about the Christian bit, I've talked a fair bit about that, because that's the basis of SALT and what we do. And kind of today for me is about, can we get some more volunteers, please, and some other needs met? And those people do need to be Christian to be comfortable in the team and to be able to survive. But the healing and the hope is there for everybody, anybody who wants to come through those doors, who's been sexually abused in their childhood. God has no favourites, and he just wants people to know freedom from that distresses and torments them. So I've forgotten what the question was now, Ian.
I like the way you're going with it, though, because I think this is maybe where we need to go, because there can be a sense from people who haven't got a Christian faith that church is a closed community. If I believe and go in, then I can access the resources. Whereas Jesus is like, no, you're all my children. I want to come here. That's been my experience. When I've been at my worst and I've been bad, that's when he's been at his best in just loving on me and I could cry now, and just bringing his experience to me and me to him. Sounds like that's what you're offering. It sounds like that open door of the love of God is absolutely wide open. It's you're a human being with a need, and God loves you and wants to meet you. Sounds to be what you're saying.
And that's kind of exactly what we say. So we don't Bible bash anybody. Everyone at assessment, as a matter of professional courtesy, is informed that we're a Christian-based organisation. And what I usually say is, so that means that while I'm listening to you, I'm listening to God, I believe, and receiving counsel from him on your behalf, because he wants you healed. And then we say you won't hear any more about that unless you ask. And we are absolutely clear that with team that they stick to that. And they do. So survivors in general won't hear any more about that after their assessment unless they ask. So just want to be clear about that people are safe to come in. And many years ago we did have a couple of listeners who crossed that line, and they were removed from the team, because we have to stick to that. And I just want to say about volunteers that we need, and listeners, this is a tough call. But what you see the Holy Spirit do in you and through you, in 37 years, we've never had a case of burnout. I think that's unheard of.
That is in many environments, and in your environment, I should imagine even more so.
Yeah.
Let's just take a break, because we're going to run out of time before this next track. Otherwise, we'll come back and we'll discuss in more depth the kind of roles that people can help you with, and also the funding that you've got at the minute. So we're back to hear more from Tracy on this subject right after this. Talking with Tracy White. If you just joined us, what are you doing? It's nearly the end of the programme. You'll have to catch us on Listen Again. Talking with Tracy White from SALT Southwest, Sexual Abuse Listening Therapy. Tracy, it's been a fascinating conversation. I wish we could go on longer, but we do need to get to some purpose here as well to help you guys. You've got roles available, haven't you, within what you're doing, where people could at least explore, can I come and get involved and help, or can I support you? Unpack a little bit. What is it that people can help with?
Okay, so I think we've said a little bit about the need for volunteers. So both male and female volunteers we need. People don't need any qualifications as such. They can have if they want, but they don't need. What's needed is, I think what we said earlier on about the ability to listen and be trained in listening. I don't think it's a thing human beings do naturally. I certainly didn't,
no.
and still don't sometimes. I have to remind myself, Tracy, shut up. And it's not just shutting up here, it's shutting up here.
In your
and
head, yeah.
in your heart. It's being quiet internally as well as externally. So there's training for that. The people will hear a lot of stuff, but there's lots of support with that. So no qualifications needed, just an anointing and a heart, a willingness to learn. And people do need to be Christian to be on that core part of the team as listeners, and have been stable in a local church for at least 6 months. We do ask for leaders, pastors, vicars references, because we do protect people. It's working in the area of trauma, so we need to protect people. We take responsibility for that and make sure that people have got somewhere to go and good relationships where they can get some prayer maybe for their own stuff. So we will do that anyway, but they need it in their own churches.
Yeah, I think you made it quite clear that people coming to be listeners, their own issues, if they have them there, are going to surface, and you're there for that. You expect that, and you've got things in place for that to help them through that.
Absolutely. So we do have prayer and worship times. It's part of what we do. Lots of supervision, like we said. We source training externally at times, and SALT will pay for that. And you just get to build relationship. It's an amazing environment. So though, yes, there is lots of trauma and there's lots of difficult stuff, actually the things that we see change, and the hope that people report back, people come back over time in tears saying, this has changed my entire life. I've had 20 years of therapy. I've seen 20 therapists, but this has scratched where I itch, and it's changed drastically. And it changes everything. People's ability to be intimate with their partners, to parent their children, to hold their job down and excel and exceed, and just to live a free life, really free.
That's got to be super rewarding, volunteering and seeing those outcomes in people. That's just got to make it...
It's what brings you back day after day.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't see it on that level. You don't see it anywhere else, I don't think. We work Mondays through to Thursdays. Mondays and Wednesdays are the women's days. Tuesdays and Thursdays are the men's days. So we have to provide dedicated spaces for men and women. So we do have some females. So in the men's work, it's one male, one female listener, because we always work in twos. In the women's work, it's 2 females, because that's just how it works best.
Yeah.
They all have pretty much the same process, but there are some differences. So that will depend on what days people want to volunteer, whether they want to work with the men or the women, or, they can have a go at both. We can also train people up over time to run the psychoeducational skills sessions that we do. We train people up. We find people's skills and giftings and callings and abilities, and we invest in people, our listeners. So as listeners, we experience lots of growth as well. I think outside of that, there's a team meeting. That's mandatory. People have to attend that every other Wednesday afternoon. So regardless of what your voluntary days or day might be, every other Wednesday afternoon is necessary, 1 till 3. So outside of that, we really could do with an IT advisor, person, manager type thing, a local person who can come in and resolve some IT issues for us. It'd be great if somebody would donate their time to do that, if they're savvy with IT, but we are happy to pay for that. We understand everybody's got to earn a living. We'd like to look into getting into some social media. I know zero about social media.
It's a big old area, big old
as
hairy,
does the team
horrible
lead,
place.
as does the admin person. We're just not a team of social media. But we appreciate that in this day and age, it's necessary. But it's a dodgy area for what we do. So anyone who wants to come and advise us about how we might be able to use social media, and maybe even oversee that for us, that would be amazing. And the other area is funding. So we lost about 85% of our income 3 months ago when the Ministry of Justice changed their criteria. So we didn't match for that funding anymore. So that was a bit of a shock. So we're trying to pick up from that. So people can donate, from this. We're on local giving. People can do direct debits or backs, or they can give through the website. But what we would really like is some ongoing security. So if there's anyone who has a heart for fundraising, a little bit of experience, doesn't mind hearing a bit about abuse and trauma, because you even need to know about it to write about it and to apply for money for it. So we would desperately love that, someone that could take up that role. And it wouldn't be paid initially because our funds are struggling right now. So anyone who wants to donate, please go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
But if there's anyone who's listening who's got a heart for fundraising, we might be able to access some training for them if they've never done any. We just love investing in people.
That's really good.
Wherever we can, we'll invest whatever we can.
So how can people get in touch about any of those options, Tracy? What's the best route? Through the website?
Yes, the website. You can email us from the website and it will come straight through to SALT. You can phone us. The phone number's on the website. It's a Plymouth landline number. We don't give out the mobile number. And it's 600 599. Fairly easy number to remember.
That's a good one. Yeah, okay. And what's the web address? I mean, people will find it by looking on Google, or other search engines are available.
But the easiest thing is if people type in Salt Southwest, type in the whole thing, and we'll be the top one coming up.
That's really good. Tracy, we're going to have to draw it to a close. Unfortunately, we're going to be beaten by time. It would be good to get you back on and see how things are going in the future, and maybe unpack a little bit more around the general topic, because I think it's really helpful for listeners. So it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
It's been great being here.
And you may have noticed, if you're watching on the website, that the camera work isn't brilliant. That's because I've been operating the camera on this side, and it's the first time I've done it. So you have to forgive me, regular listeners of Cross Rhythms. If you're used to Dave doing it brilliantly, well, get Dave to do this job and he can do this brilliantly. No. So there you go. But thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned. More music and life all day through here on Cross Rhythms. Those contact again, 600 599 if you want to get in touch with Tracy and the team about volunteering, or about fundraising help, or if you're an IT guru and you want to help them out, or check it out through the website, Salt Southwest. Punch that into your search engine of whatever flavour it is, and you'll find them. Stay tuned. More music and life through the day, and we'll catch you next time here on Cross Rhythms.